Just for your information, members, we have 3 items on the agenda and 1 item for consent. And the first bill is to be heard is SB 47 by Senator Hill. Please join us at the microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. First, I want to thank the committee staff for the analysis, and I accept the committee amendments suggested on page 5 of the analysis. And before I start my statement, I want to just speak briefly about my disbelief that Labor could be opposing this bill. My understanding is that were it not for Field Turf, and that's one of the companies that installs the artificial turf, for their opposition to the bill, Labor would not be opposed. But since Field Turf has relationships with the BAS, that's the tire recyclers, and the Painters Union, which installs the fields, this children's health bill is being targeted as part of kind of an industry power play that we're seeing. These interests are afraid of competition from companies that provide organic and alternative turf field products. But all of these fields, when installed in a government, at a government facility or through government, are installed with and at prevailing wages. I think it's shameful that they would oppose this bill, even though we continue to allow for any field product that a school wants to choose. The bill allows for business as usual. It just requires consideration of the options available to schools. So let me start my statement with testimony from the mother of a former Pasadena, California high school soccer player who wasn't able to be here today because she has an oncology appointment before heading back to college. Emily was a soccer goalkeeper and played on artificial turf fields in Southern California on a daily basis for 6 years. She graduated high school in 2013 and went to the Northeast for college. Later that year, doctors found a 6-inch tumor in her lungs. She was soon diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Emily underwent 6 months of grueling chemotherapy treatments, and since the cancer did not retreat completely due to the large size of the tumor, she also had to undergo a month of radiation treatment. Emily received a cancer-free diagnosis in October of 2014, but she and the rest of the family is often tortured by the fear of reoccurrence. We did not have any history of lymphoma in our family, and Emily was an atypical case of Hodgkin's, being so young, being female, having such a large tumor in the lungs, and no prior immune diseases or issues. Emily remembered years of diving into the turf with crumb rubber getting in her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, as well as scraping and cutting her skin. As a goalkeeper, she was coached to trap the ball with her body, which often meant repeatedly bringing most of her body, including her face, directly onto the surface of the turf. This occurred regularly through practices and games in all types of weather, including times when the surfaces of the field were blindingly hot. There's no question in my mind that the toxicity of these ground-up waste tires was the source of our daughter's cancer. We had no idea that is what she was playing on all these years. Why would anyone think it is a good idea to have children play on dirty old tires day after day? I hope that your fellow lawmakers have the courage to do the right thing and help prevent more young athletes from going through what Emily has had to endure. Thank you for working on this issue. Sincerely, Bridget, Emily's mom, Pasadena, California. Another cancer survivor, Delaney from Petaluma, is also attending college and was unable to be here today. She asked that her brief testimony be read. My name is Delaney, and I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer my junior year of high school. I am now a freshman in college. I've been playing soccer since I was 7 years old and have always practiced on turf fields with tire crumbs. I am a goalkeeper and would come home with countless tire crumbs in my hair, mouth, cleats, and clothes. I ingested a lot of these tire crumbs throughout practice and games because I was constantly diving and sliding. My team practiced 4 days a week and had 2 games every weekend and was mostly played on synthetic turf. After being diagnosed with cancer, my life changed a lot. I had to take a very long break from soccer due to surgery in order to remove my thyroid and lymph nodes that were cancerous. There is no history of thyroid cancer at all in my family, and thyroid cancer is very rarely seen in people of my age. My surgeon at UCSF had no explanation and was even shocked himself when he found the cancer. After my surgery, I had to go through radiation, and I'm now taking a pill that replaces my thyroid, which I will need to take for the rest of my life. I get constant blood work, scans, and doctor visits to ensure the cancer does not come back. Cancer not only affected me physically, but mentally as well. I will always be afraid of the cancer coming back. It is a fear that I will never diminish. Thank you for listening to my story. Delaney from Petaluma. Members, last year I introduced Senate Bill 47 to require the state to study the health impacts on children from waste tires on their fields and to put a moratorium on using ground-up tires until the study was complete. Over the last year, CalRecycle and the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment agreed to spend $3 million to study the health impacts of these fields, which are made up of 20,000 ground-up tires each field. In an effort to address the concerns from opposition, I've amended my bill to simply require schools and local governments to spend a few minutes researching the different kinds of turf fields available to them before moving forward with their project. Since most of these fields cost upward of $1 million of taxpayer money, it seems reasonable that a school look at organic and alternative infills in addition to infill from ground-up waste tires. Alternatives include infill made from cork, rice husks, coconut fibers, sand, and virgin crumb rubber. The consideration of alternatives in my bill only lasts for 3 years while the state conducts its study. It's important to look at the options since, on the one hand, the state is providing schools and local governments with millions of dollars in grants to reduce the cost of installing fields made from used tires. Yet on the other hand, the state is studying this material to determine potential health impacts. Since we're talking about the health of our children, I think it makes sense for schools to do their research and make a decision that's best for each local community. This bill continues to allow local control and decision-making. I want to highlight a few studies that are important to consider. They found that artificial turf fields containing organic infill can reduce temperatures significantly compared to fields that use waste tire infill. In 2009, the Los Angeles Unified School District banned turf fields containing infill from waste tire crumb rubber and instead chose alternative infills for their artificial turf fields. The Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment's 2010 study on used tire crumb rubber in artificial turf fields reviewed chemical concentrations in their air above the fields and found that 8 chemicals appear on the California Prop 65 list of chemicals known to the state to cause cancer. 8 chemicals. Exposure via inhalation to 5 of these chemicals, benzene, formaldehyde, naphthalene, and nitromethane, and styrene, gave increased lifetime cancer risks that exceed 1 in 1 million. According to the study, the highest risk was from nitromethane, which could cause about 9 cancer cases in a hypothetical population of 1 million soccer players. The study also found that 2 additional identified chemicals, toluene and benzene, appear on the California Prop 65 list as developmental reproductive poisons. At least 10 studies since 2007, including those by the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, have found potentially harmful lead levels in turf fibers and in rubber crumbs. A 2011 study titled An Evaluation of Potential Exposures to Lead and Other Metals as a Result of Aerosolized Particulate Matter from Artificial Turf Playing Fields concluded that artificial turf can deteriorate to form dust containing lead at levels that may pose a risk to children. A 2012 study published in the scientific journal Chemosphere titled Hazardous Organic Chemicals in Rubber Recycled Tire Playgrounds and Pavers showed the high content of toxic chemicals in these recycled materials and found that uses of recycled rubber tires, especially those targeting play areas and other facilities for children, should be a matter of regulatory concern. The Swedish Chemicals Agency found that waste tire crumb rubber contains several particularly hazardous substances and recommended that rubber granules from waste tires not be used in artificial turf. In 2013, the United States Environmental Protection Agency posted a disclaimer on the only limited study on tire crumb risk it had ever conducted. The EPA press release summarizing the study has been stamped with a notice that it was outdated, and a new link has been appended to a statement stressing the need for future studies to enable more comprehensive conclusions. I'm almost concluded, members, and I appreciate your indulgence. On May 19th, 2015, May 19th of last year, the chair of the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, Elliot Kaye, testified before the United States Congress that he no longer stands behind a 2008 statement from the Commission that crumb rubber is safe to play on. His testimony described new federal studies underway. The CPSC also ordered an enforcement review of marketing of artificial turf products for children. So this is the marketing of artificial turf products for children because the commission found lead levels in artificial sports fields above statutory limits in children's products. A June 2015 study conducted at Yale University by Environmental and Human Health Incorporated, an organization of physicians and public health professionals, found that crumb rubber infill from used tires contain at least 96 chemicals. Of the 96 chemicals detected, a little under one-half had no toxicity assessments done on them for their health effects. Of the one-half that had toxicity assessments, 20% were probable carcinogens and 40% were irritants. Of the irritants found, 24% were respiratory irritants, some causing asthma symptoms, 37% were skin irritants, and 27% were eye irritants. While the public awaits the results of the OEHA study and other studies being conducted at the national level, it is in the public's best interest, especially from a children's health perspective, that schools and local governments consider, that's all we're asking, consider the various infill options when choosing to install artificial turf fields. The Los Angeles Unified School District and the LA City Parks and Rec already banned tires in fields. The New York City Park and Recreation Department bans tires in fields. This simply requires consideration of options. With all the information I've shared and with the ongoing research, we owe it to our children to require schools to consider the options for 3 years until we have more information. Thank you, members, for your indulgence. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let's pause, and we have a quorum, so let's take the roll.
Lou?
Here.
Lou here, Runner. Block? Hancock? Here. Hancock here. Leyva? Mendoza? Here. Mendoza here. Monning? Here. Monning here. Pan? Vidak? Here. Vidak here. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Thank you. So those in support of the bill, please identify yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson and members of the committee. My name is...
Press the little button so we can hear you. Oh, we could hear you, I guess. It's great.
Good morning. My name is Anthony DeChico. I am the Director of Business Development for Soccer at AstroTurf, one of the companies who builds synthetic fields across the country, an industry leader, the company that invented the industry. I'm also a resident of Playa del Rey down in Southern California. And I appreciate the opportunity to address you today because the realities of the evolution of synthetic turf fields are at a crossroads. And the members in this room today have a very important opportunity to continue to evolve the spaces and the quality of the surfaces that our athletes play on. There's a process here, and to date, there's no evidence or studies or any reports that link crumb rubber to cancer. But that in itself is not enough to not push forward this measure, which at least asks the questions. This industry for a very long time has relied and continues to rely on the status quo. Crumb rubber was first introduced to fields in 1997 and really has not dramatically changed its formulation since 2004, which is carpet over stone, which we know now is not the best practices. So what's happened with LA Parks and Rec, what's happened with LAUSD, and a number of other municipalities and school districts is an evolved system that takes into account all of the variables and all of the components for how to build a field. And the reality is that what we're finding is that 1 in 5 concussions now are a result of head to field impact. And so the best practices for building fields going forward is to include a pad in the system. And as soon as you add a pad into the system, the crumb rubber becomes mitigated. Crumb rubber is there as a shock attenuation. Not a particularly great shock attenuation, but one that for the last 15 years we've been comfortable with. And we're now at a point where continuing down that path is going to benefit the industry. The industry is able to utilize crumb rubber as a commodity product that they can charge a premium price for. The alternative is that you push this measure forward and simply raise the expectation for people who are building fields in the best interest of the public. The public deserves to have a voice in this process, and currently that doesn't exist. So the standard right now is for people in these positions to rubber stamp or to copy and paste what's been done before. And I'm here to tell you what's been done before is no longer a best practice for the industry. In my opinion, this bill, and I followed the bill a year ago. The bill a year ago would have put a burden on municipalities and school districts and private organizations who are building fields. This bill does not. A public hearing and a conversation is not something that anyone should be afraid of. The other concern here appears to be regards to labor. To the best of my knowledge and my ability to wrap my head around this, I do not see that this bill in any way undermines labor or undermines their ability to employ their workers. I don't see that this is going to cause fewer fields to be built, and it's not preventing crumb rubber fields from being built. It's simply saying we have to add another step to this process. I believe that's it. The only other thing I'd say is I equate it to buying a car in the 60s, right? You could still buy a 1950s Chevy, but you knew at that point that safety belts saved lives. In this case, we don't think that death is as large a concern, but what we do know is that building fields with pads underneath create a safer environment, a better environment for athletes to play, and this is the proper progression forward.
Thank you. Others in support?
Hi, and good morning. My name is Catherine Alcantar. I'm here on behalf of the Center for Environmental Health, based in Oakland, California. Thank you to Chair Liu and the members of the committee for the opportunity to provide comments. CEH first became aware of the problem of crumb rubber after we found and forced companies to remove lead from the artificial turf itself due to high levels of lead that could cause reproductive and developmental harm. Having worked really hard to get manufacturers to comply and take out the lead, it was extremely disappointing to learn that children may still be exposed to a number of toxic chemicals found in the crumb rubber used as infill. We are here in support of the bill today because we feel like it's a really important opportunity to look at safer alternatives. You know, again, the bill only requires that schools and local municipalities actually consider. It doesn't require them to actually take on the alternative, but to actually consider. And as an organization that has strived and worked for support of our safer consumer product regs, we feel like this is a step in the right direction. It's already been highlighted today that there are a number of studies out there that are highlighting some of the current concerns. In particular, we're concerned from a children's environmental health perspective because children are more vulnerable, and any exposure to carcinogens at early age, children have the rest of their lives to develop the disease. And so it's very different than an older person being exposed. Children are especially vulnerable to this, to any toxics, especially carcinogens found in the crumb rubber. Another important point is that, far too many children suffer from asthma, and it's been found that the alternatives actually can reduce the heat, how hot the actual surfaces get out there. So this issue of using crumb rubber, which causes the field to become extremely hot, could exacerbate asthma in children. So with that, I just wanted to highlight that, it's really important that we not focus on any sort of short-term costs, but really think about the long-term costs. In particular, there's a study out there by the Public Health Institute that demonstrates that there are the actual long-term health costs, not just to the children's health, but to the system in California for any diseases related to environmental health, whether that be cancer or reproductive or developmental harm. And so it's important to consider those long-term costs. As an organization who also works hard to protect workers' health, we find it extremely important from a worker health perspective as well to look at alternatives, because the people who will actually be installing any infill may be exposed as well. So with that, we thank Senator Hill for his leadership on this issue, and we ask for your vote in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, Bill Alio with the Environmental Working Group. A couple of quick points. It struck me that the first witness said athletes on these fields. My daughter's 9, and kids younger than that play on these fields. I don't consider her an athlete yet. These are kids, so I think it's important to be extra safe. You start young, you start getting exposure young. This bill is a reasonable and prudent approach to a problem that we don't know everything about, so I think it's important that entities go in with eyes wide open on their choices. It's a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
My name is Lynn Beeson, and I have a few brief comments. I came from San Francisco today with my friend Kathleen. I'm a grandmother and a mother, and right now my daughter said, "Come today, Mom, good for you," is a 54-year-old Spanish bilingual teacher at the oldest elementary school in California, Science Magnet School, Spring Valley, and waiting for what is likely her third bout of peritoneal cancer, followed by ovarian, preceded by breast cancers. My grandson, who had on his side of the family, who's Vietnamese, had been exposed through his family, Agent Orange. But my grandson, at 14, he's 16 now. By the way, my daughter was the first and only girl on any high school varsity soccer team in San Francisco in '78. So and I fought with her grandfather that girls should play. Her son now is 16, and 2 years ago volunteered 8 hours a day by the entity that leases the fields in San Francisco in the hopes that he'd get a paid job the next year. The studies that were done that are limited by any standards, tested it based on a kid a certain age playing on it 3 hours a day. Let me just say one other thing as far as labor is concerned. I retired from the 6 mayors in 1999 and headed up the first Office of Child Care. But my grandparents had a farm. We don't even hear the word nature. Kids all over the world play on sand and dirt. The fact is that the city of San Francisco has given millions of dollars to install a specific material funded by the Fisher family, frankly, and it brought me out of my retirement because of my kids' health. And I've been around the block a lot of times. I was on the Labor Council, was on the executive board of my union, and I was hoping I would see, I think her name, I looked at some of your bios, Leva from the Grocery Checkers Union, to have the Carpet Layers Union leading a massive fight like this, to even study. I was here a year ago. And this is, a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to have a bipartisan issue come out of education, because they're giving money to put it in schools and eliminating children's only exposure to nature. What really got me and lit a fire under me was to have kids not being taught that organic food is great, get rid of BPA, don't buy products from here, but yet tell them that plastic fields and crumbled up tires that are no longer tires, therefore under another regulation acceptable, can't be put in landfills because of the toxicity. So let's not be fooled. Everybody knows it who knows, and that's what surprised me. FIFA women were sued with David Boyce over the issue. It is a strategy backed by EPA from the very beginning to recycle tires, and it's a problem. And I also support recycling. They're great for roads, they're great for other things. And I'm not going to take any more time, but I would just commend all of you to check out Sandra Steingraber's books, Over Children and the Environment. It's educated me, and I thank you for your service and your time.
Thank you.
I'd like 2 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm Kathleen McCowan. I'm chair of Healthy Soccer San Francisco, a group of parents and coaches. We strongly support this bill. Tire crumb infill is 30 to 50% carbon black. When finely ground, carbon black is a Prop 65 human carcinogen. Dr. Philip Landegren, Dean of Global Health at Mount Sinai Hospital, calls tire crumb infill a veritable witch's brew of toxic chemicals. After our children play on these fields, they blow their nose, it comes out black. They spit out the tire particles, which I've provided for all of you, only when they haven't swallowed them. Before school districts pour tons of this toxic industrial waste into our children's sports fields, alternatives must be considered. Dr. David Brown, a respected CDC toxicologist, says our kids playing on these fields have cancer risk of a moderate smoker. Over 200 young players have reported their cancers. Most are goalies who have the greatest exposure, like Delaney. We've identified 5 others in the Bay Area who have developed cancers. 3 of them are brain cancers, and 1 child has died. Healthy Soccer San Francisco testified at a San Francisco Board of Education Building and Grounds Committee. These board members were surprised that they had never been briefed on the health risk of tire crumb or even knew which fields had them. Their staff was directed to develop a report. This bill will trigger these now absent Board of Education briefings. As the cancer toll mounts, California voters are supporting grass and alternative infills. A year ago, 98,000 San Franciscans voted against tire crumb in Golden Gate Park sports fields. Having California school districts consider alternative infills is just common sense. Requiring absolute proof of causation is too high a requirement when our children's health and even lives are at stake. The EPA has withdrawn its prior findings that tire crumb is safe. It's time for the state of California to do the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is there any others in support of the bill? Seeing none, let's have the opposition come up. Those opposed to the bill? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Terry Lavelle. I represent CRM Company of Compton and Stockton, the largest tire rubber processor on the West Coast. We unfortunately must have to oppose this bill like we opposed the previous 2 versions of SB 47. And it's for a couple of very simple reasons. One is that this issue, this supposed link between adverse health effects and crumb rubber is one that has been studied over and over again for the last 30 years. I was a advisor to Senator Wesley Chesborough when the California Integrated Waste Management Board started the tire program back in 1991. And I followed the program ever since. As various tire products came about, studies came out because the industry wanted studies known as to what any kind of effects. And to this day, worldwide, over 50 studies, and we've said it before and we'll say it again, over 50 studies have shown no link between adverse health effects and the product. Our concern is that the intent of the bill, while meaning, is really not needed. Virtually every jurisdiction today considering synthetic turf fields is looking at the issue. Ever since NBC reported over a year ago of possible linkage of illness, concerned parents, and the general public has become very aware of this. There really is no need to spend the taxpayers' money to push this legislation. It does not do anything that local jurisdictions that are considering these projects don't already do. They are studying this thing to death. Our feeling is that, as Senator Jackson said in an earlier hearing on SB 47, is that the bill presumes that there is something wrong with crumb rubber. And until a study comes forth, and we've supported the $3 million OESA study. The industry has been very strongly supportive of anything that will try to get to answers of questions that are still out there. But until something comes forth, providing some kind of a linkage, legislation like that only serves to perpetuate a fear among the populace, a fear among parents that there is something wrong with it. And we feel that that presumptive nature of the bill is wrong for the legislature to push. And for that reason, we oppose the bill.
Thank you.
Steve Kraus with CRM Company. Again, we strongly oppose the bill. I think that, again, Terry just spoke that there's a presumption that something's wrong with crumb rubber and that alternative materials might be better suited. However, these alternative materials haven't gone through 50-plus studies to determine what their composition, what their potential impacts are, any harmful effects they might have on the fields. And yet we have a material that's been highly scrutinized, gone through a lot of studies. Again, we continue to support the research and effort to make sure that the material is safe. You know, crumb rubber is not chemically altered. When the manufacturing of crumb rubber is not chemically altered, it's solely it's like taking a piece of paper and cutting it up into materials. So if you believe that there's something wrong with the particles, then obviously there's something wrong with the material, the raw material from the get-go. So again, and so how many tire installers do you hear of this having a problem with? We're very concerned with our employee safety, and yet we don't have employees that are that have contained cancer. So again, I think we need to use sound judgment, and we continue to support the research and make sure that these materials are safe. But I think we also need to uphold all materials to the same scrutiny. So. And again, I think generally most government agencies, they have a process in place. And this bill is suggesting that they scrap whatever process they have in place to be mandated by legislature. And I think that no local government agency, they want to do things the way that they have already established their processes.